Hi, everybody.
Hello, how are
Hi.
you?
I'm good.
Good.
We got rid of that stupid plant, and we got us a car
Yes.
right here. This is
We've upgraded a little
we
bit.
upgraded. Yeah, I ate the plant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
no, I didn't. Yeah, that thing was stupid looking. This is much nicer, don't you think? It kind of goes with the decor.
Yeah. Feels more like you.
It does.
Yeah,
It
fits
does.
you well.
What are we doing? What are we talking about
Today, we are talking about emotional and mental health.
Got it.
It's a big topic.
I got a PhD.
Figured.
Not so much
PhD
in the
experience.
not so much in the health part, but definitely in the whole experience part.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna ask you some questions about really your process with your own emotional and mental health journey, but also how people can position themselves if they are going through that process,
Yeah.
or if they have a loved one that is experiencing something similar to that. So maybe
Yeah.
you could fill us in. I know you talk openly about this, but you
Yeah.
talk openly about having an emotional crash
Yeah.
and a mental crash, and what did both of those look like?
Well, first of all, about 12, I guess it's been 12 years ago or so, I had a couple of, kind of like the worst case storms kind of homogenized into one, with my son going through divorce and my daughter having a nervous breakdown, and all of that happening within just a few months. It was just got exhausting. I started out not being able to sleep at night, so I went just weeks and weeks with no sleep. Probably 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. I probably slept a total of a couple hours a night at the most, and that went on for, well, yeah, like 6, 7, 8 weeks. My daughter calling constantly, my son over all the time. 3 little kids. Very tough situation. And then one day I started to get depressed, which is really, like, I have had anxiety in my past. I've pushed through anxiety many years ago and kind of have an emotional breakdown from anxiety and panic attacks.
Yeah.
And that lasted like 3.5 years of having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and all kinds of crazy stuff. That was when I was very young, in my early 20s. And then pretty much, not that I've never experienced anxiety, but pretty much lived without that for years. And then I just got up one morning and I just started feeling depressed. Now, I have to tell you, like, I had never experienced depression in my life.
Wow.
Maybe feel down like a normal person would
Yeah.
for a day or two. It's like,
Sad.
yeah, everybody's felt the blues. Everybody's had the blues. But I mean, this felt like someone dropped me in a deep pit. And I sort of at first thought, well, I'll pop out of it. But then, like, days turned into a week, and then a week turned into, a month. And I was just getting worse and worse and worse. And pretty soon anxiety started, not just with the depression, but with the anxiety, panic attacks, started having panic attacks again. But I never experienced depression like that before. I've never experienced depression, honestly. Comparatively speaking, I have to say I never experienced depression. Pretty soon, I laid on the couch and couldn't go to work, and didn't want to leave the house, and had really, pretty. I had so many fears about just even leaving the house, and I laid on the couch for about 6 months. It was
Wow.
very intense. Finally, I'll give you kind of the end of that.
Yeah.
I finally got off the couch by, Kathy started saying, you got to go see a doctor, because I went to see a professional counselor, and they were beautiful to me, but it was good to have someone to care, but they didn't really help me.
Right.
And so I started reading books. Like, I started getting these books on Carolyn Leaf book, and
Yes.
Lucille Bassett has a book called From Panic to Power. And I started reading these books about brain chemistry and all of that stuff. And I started to, like, oh, I'm not sure exactly what's wrong with me, but I think I need to go see a doctor. So I went to see a doctor, and they gave me some antidepressants, which I actually got them for 2 months and didn't take them.
Wow.
I think there's a lot of people that, like Christians, that are like, oh no, Jesus is going to heal me. And by the way, he did.
Right.
But it'd be kind of like if you have diabetes, you'd probably go take insulin, It was like that. There was something wrong with my brain chemistry. I had, very low serotonin. So I started taking some antidepressants. I had to take 4 different ones before I could even take one my body would tolerate. So that took like 4 weeks. And it took another 3 weeks before it ever started working. So that was helpful. I mean, I'd say it's helpful to know, like, didn't help immediately.
Immediately, right.
And then finally about, I would say, so that whole thing was probably like 2 months total. And I started coming out of it. I eventually realized that, part of my problem was my hormones were all messed up.
Yeah.
You don't think of guys having hormonal problems really, but that turned out to be the ultimate problem with my body. But it was really tough, and I have incredible compassion for people that have mental illness now.
Yeah. And it was a very physical response, right?
Yeah.
That you were having.
It's spiritual too, that it turned
Really?
spiritual, the challenge is that we're so interconnected, spirit, soul, and body. So, if you have something, like if you're sick for a long period of time, eventually it's going to wear you out, right? Your soul. And if you stay down long enough, eventually the demonic spirits will try to take advantage of you.
Right.
So it becomes a spiritual war. The question becomes like, where is it rooted? And I would say that crash was rooted in not enough sleep. It messed up my hormonal system,
Right.
my body chemistry, and then once you get down, you have to do something to rebuild that.
Right. So it's really physical, those processes.
Started out physical.
Right. But then also you talked about a little bit having panic attacks prior when you were younger.
Yeah.
And was that a physical thing, or was that more so spiritual, emotional? What was that rooted in?
Again, like I would say that was rooted in a demonic spirit. Like I was growing and learning, and I was moving in the spirit world.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand, I say if you don't understand the invisible man, you might become you might become a victim of the invisible man if you don't understand the spirit world.
Yeah.
And so it started very spiritual. I started having these visions in my mind, like imagination would be a better word.
Yeah.
And I would just see myself doing these crazy things and killing people, doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And they would come like 5-second short videos. And pretty soon they would be like 10, 15 of them a day. And I just had a panic attack. And then of course, as soon as you get fear going, you release adrenaline into your body. Adrenaline's a drug.
Right.
So now you're literally, like, joking aside, your brain is actually on drugs.
Right.
So you have a panic attack, it releases adrenaline, and now you're actually drunk on fear. And so I did that for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And I finally got delivered. And I wrote about it in the book Spirit Wars, actually.
Yeah.
I finally got delivered, and then I've said this before. In fact, we did a whole series right at the beginning of COVID because there were so many. We were getting just floods of people like, I'm having panic attacks. I know that you had them too. And so I think we did like 4 weeks or 8 weeks free series. By the way, I think we can still have it, that you can get called Spirit Wars, and it's my whole story about spiritual warfare. And I learned, Ellie, that it's one thing to get free. It's another thing to stay free.
Wow.
And so it was that 3.5-year journey wasn't just getting free. It was like learning how to stay free, making sure that I controlled my mind instead of my mind controlling me.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
I think so often when you're in a space in your mind that's really foggy, or you're just not feeling like yourself, and you've come to a place you're like, this is just not me, you often actually don't know what you need.
Yeah.
Like you just are in such a space that is just so unfamiliar.
Yeah.
So what are maybe even some practical things that you felt like you needed? Maybe after the fact, you look back and you're like, that's what I needed, but you couldn't tell in the moment.
Okay, I'm going to just give you some like steps.
Perfect.
If I'm having a panic attack, I wouldn't run to the doctor.
Okay.
If I'm having panic attacks, like this is becoming,
like a theme.
This is a theme. Like I'm having 3, 4, 5, 6 of them a week. That's different. So let me say, everybody has experienced a panic attack.
Yeah.
If you're older than 30, you probably have experienced a panic attack, and probably even if you're younger. So it's like, that's not uncommon for you to have an adrenaline rush that's negative, basically, and you got scared. If those start to compound and you're getting several of them, I'm like, okay, something's not right. Warfare is normal. Okay, so let's go. Let's talk about the spiritual side for a minute.
Yeah.
Ephesians 6 says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, and it gives us 4 different powers. So warfare is normal, but warfare is not a lifestyle. So
That's
I
so
heard
good.
people say often, it'd say like I've been in warfare for 15 years. I'm like, oh no, that's not warfare. That's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So like I'm just trying to make distinction like normal, not normal. I had an anxiety attack. How many? Oh, I had one last week. Have you had them very often? No. Well, let's just figure out that little space, but that's not, probably you're fine. I had some spiritual warfare for 2 weeks. Normal. I had a spiritual warfare for 2 years. Not normal.
Right.
Are you with me?
Yeah, so timeline is very important.
Yeah. What the intensity? Because everybody, what you don't want to do is like, I need help. Every time something happens, I'm freaking out. Like something's wrong with me. It's like, no. If you're doing anything for the Lord, you're going to have some pushback, and it's very normal for the enemy to attack your thoughts. This is, it's all in the series we did. We did a great series on spiritual warfare and what to do about it. So that's normal. So, but if it becomes long or it becomes intense, then I would say, here's a few things. One is I would go to the doctor and I would get a complete blood test. Ladies and men, because it's common for doctors to give women tests around their whole hormonal system, because obviously they have a menstrual cycle and all of that can get messed up, and that can really mess up. That could create all kinds of anxiety. But men have the same issues, and doctors rarely check that. So I went to the doctor 3 times, and they didn't check it. They did a blood test and never checked my hormonal system.
Yeah.
And finally on the 4th time they did, and come to find out, like I had almost no T in my system.
Wow.
And so once they started putting that back, I started getting better.
Got some life again.
Yeah, but this the second thing is, I would say here's some basic things. If you don't sleep, you will get crazy.
Right.
So if you're not sleeping, you have to do whatever you need to do to sleep, because sleep is where your brain, I've done so much research. Like this is where especially your body too, but this is where your brain, this is where your brain recovers. We call it unstringing the bow, thinking of a bow and arrow. Like this is where your brain recovers. If you go day after day and your brain doesn't have downtime to recover, it can't process right. And pretty soon, like literally your biological part of your brain stops working, which would happen to me. That's what happened to me. We are designed to need 6 to 9 hours of sleep. If you don't get that kind of sleep, something's going to give. And it can start with, some anxiety. It can move to depression. It can create hallucinations, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so if you don't pay attention to that, you're in trouble. So I don't want to promote sleeping pills, but I want to say, if you get in a really desperate situation, you have to do whatever you have to do to sleep.
Right. Yeah. Often I've heard you say as well, this maybe is more so on like the spiritual side, but you often say like, not all your thoughts are your own.
Yes.
How do you decipher which thought is your own and which thought is not yours?
Well, part of the challenge is, in my sleep analogy, part of the challenge is that it gets so confusing. Like, you don't know, like, is that the enemy? Is that me? And pretty soon it's like I'm under warfare. Well, you might be under warfare, or your processor's broken, right? Your lens is actually broken. Like, so that's one. I would say you have to get physically, biologically well. And 2, I would say that warfare has a common theme. It's you can see it in the book of Nehemiah. Again, we taught on this, but warfare has a common theme. Like it first of all, it attacks your identity. So the devil's like, who are these feeble Jews? This, we're speaking of the Nehemiah passage. Who are these feeble Jews? And pretty soon I'm starting to question myself. Like, who am I? What's wrong with me? No one ever likes me.
Yeah.
And then it questions your ability to perform. Can they actually restore this wall? Can you actually do what God's called you to do? Are you really? And you end up with this warfare that comes. it's really, it feels like it's coming from your own mind, but
You're
it's
like
actually
doubting and
doubting. And also like, if people knew what you were thinking today, they would know you're not a Christian.
accusing you, man.
Yeah. So the way demonic warfare works is the devil gives you a thought, but that thought is actually a spirit. So it's like, think about a spirit dressed up as a thought. I know it sounds a little, but it's an easy way to picture it. It's an evil spirit dressed up as a thought. He gives you the thought, but in demonic warfare, the thought comes with an unction to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't just have a suicidal thought, you have a suicidal unction to do it. You don't just have a thought about killing someone, you actually have an unction to do it. And this is that warfare, this is the temptation. As soon as I realized, like, oh, that's just the devil, that, like, I have no desire to hurt people, I love everybody, I have no, whatever it is, I can separate me from that thought.
Yep.
Now I can war against it. But I can't war against me.
Right.
So I have to separate it so that I can sift it.
Yeah.
And once I do that, then I start to win the war. And then I win the war by, again, I want to make sure, you're sleeping.
Right.
I don't want to play this part down. Like, I want to make sure you're sleeping, you're eating right, you're getting exercise, you're getting sunlight. So those things are important.
It's like, check your physical needs. Check your
make
basic
sure
needs first.
Exactly. Make sure your processor's working.
Right.
Because everything else gets mixed up. And then once I know that's the enemy, then I begin to say, okay, that's not my thought, that's the devil's thought. And then I start to imagine, and here's the key word, Ellie, imagine, not just think.
Right.
I begin to imagine what God thinks about me.
Begin to really picture it in your mind. Yeah.
It's really important that you picture it because we are really visual learners. Let me say that again. We are actually visual learners. So when the enemy says, you're no good, and I go, no, I'm a man of God, I can repeat the scriptures, but what's really profoundly powerful is when I take 5 to 10 minutes a day and I say, Lord, what do you think about me? And as he talks to me, I imagine.
Yeah.
I imagine that.
That's huge.
That begins to cleanse and erase the other videos.
Right.
And then throughout the day, I just bring that movie back. Let's play 3 minutes of that YouTube video in my mind, right?
Yeah, that's great.
And I just begin to play it, and I notice that my confidence starts coming back.
That's so big.
Yeah, and I think that's really huge.
Yeah, that's great. I think we should just end with this one thought.
We're already done.
Yeah.
Wow, that went fast.
Wasn't that quick? We should end with this one thought. You've experienced this for yourself, but you've also had loved ones walk through similar mental health things and emotional crises. What would you encourage somebody that has a loved one walking through something like this? How would you encourage them to be there for them, or what would you encourage them to do?
Super hard to talk to a depressed person. Again, I was depressed for 6 months. How are you doing? Not good.
Right.
Are you better than yesterday? No. It's like
no hope.
No hope. Yeah. So it's very difficult to have empathy for someone. Someone's defined empathy the other day. I saw it on a social page. Someone said empathy is feeling the pain of another person. It's difficult to do that when someone's depressed or anxious, but they do need empathy. The second thing I would say is they need motivation. And one of the biggest challenges when you're depressed is you don't feel like doing anything.
Right.
Like that's it. Like even eating ice cream or doing something special, your favorite thing to do. Like, oh, nothing. Your sex drive goes away. Your drive for life goes away. It's like, I don't feel like doing anything.
Right.
But in order for me to get out of here, I actually have to do something. Whether it's go to the doctor, whether it's exercise, whether it's eat. So, almost against their will, you have to be their conscience kind of like, you have to eat.
Right.
Like, you are going to the doctor, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
You are going to take that medication until you're well,
Right.
And I think that really people who are really stuck, they actually need, I would say almost like a life coach.
Right.
And you kind of can't take any crap from them. You kind of got to go, hey, we're going for a walk together. Let's go. I don't want to, I'm afraid to leave the house. Well, I'm going to be with you. It's going to be fine. And you know, I had 3 or 4 people like that for me. And my doctor called me every day for 6 months. Every morning she called me.
What would she say?
She'd say, how you doing? I'd say, terrible. She'd say, and this is her daily talk with me. It was probably not more than a minute long.
Wow.
It would be, I've dealt with many people like you. You're going to get well. You're going to get better. You may not feel like you're getting better, but you're already getting better. And it was just the encouragement that I'm going to get better.
It's that voice of help, or
Yeah.
voice of hope. I know
Hope.
even in my life, I
Yeah.
was walking through a season where it's just like, I don't see the end to this. And you would just say to me, even you're like, every trial ends, every trial ends. And even though I couldn't see it, I'm like getting emotional. Even though I couldn't see it, just that voice, I was like, somebody believes it. Sometimes somebody else has the faith for you that you don't have.
I had a pastor too, and I won't give his name, but a pretty good friend of mine. But when he found out I crashed, he called me about 5 days out of 7. And he's a guy who had really, like, he was a year in bed. And he said to me, Chris, you don't feel like you're getting better, but let me tell you something. Every day you're inching forward, and you're actually getting better. And he would talk to me probably 3 or 4 minutes a day, most days. And he really encouraged me. And knowing somebody who's been through it, when you're in the middle, because here's the weirdest thing. When you're in the middle of that level of anxiety or that level of depression, it feels like you're never gonna get well. Right. And you can think of people all the people you know that are always depressed come to your mind like,
Yeah.
I'm going to be just like that. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, having people around you that have come out is so reassuring.
That's huge.
And then, there needs to be empathy, like I just said, but it has to be tough love too. And Kathy was that to me. Kathy would be like, I'm getting you some top ramen. I don't feel like you're eating it. This is your favorite. I'm like, no, you're eating it. And then we're going to take a walk. Oh gosh, it's the last thing I want to do is walk.
Right.
And I have to tell you, like, it was very slow coming out. Very slow. It really took me probably 2 months to come out. And then, of course, your biggest fear is that it's going to happen again.
Right.
So that's almost like PTSD, right? It's
Right.
like, my biggest fear is I'm going to slip back in. And it takes, it probably took me another year to get to the place of have confidence in my mental health that I'm actually am well. I'm actually fully well. And so I just think we should pray for the people that are on here.
Yeah.
Your world has to be very small right now for you not to have people in your life that are struggling.
Right.
Maybe they're not on the couch for 6 months, but I mean, I get so many letters and cards and emails from people like, I read your book and that's me, I'm struggling. Man, I know it's just tough.
Right.
So Lord, I just pray right now that you would, first of all, that you would heal the minds of people and that you would put the right team around them for them to get well. That wise, loving, confident, experienced people would enter their life, take them by the hand, so to speak, and walk them out of the valley of the shadow of death. And I pray, God, that you would heal their body chemistry, their minds, that you would heal their spirits, that you would heal their souls. And Lord, that this would be a new season of hope. And I want to finish, I feel like this word, I have this word that's really simple, but I feel like you're supposed to get your hopes up. I know the American saying is, don't get your hopes up, but I feel like the Lord said, get your hopes up. You're watching this, get your hopes up.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So profound.
God bless you guys.